Hear that? That's the sound of a patient whose health data is protected from a cyber attack. And that's the sound of a financial system that's digitally secured from bad actors. Right now, there's an invisible war being fought on a digital battlefield that impacts what we do every day. That's why at Peraton, we do the can't be done to help protect the vital systems we rely on. Because if we don't, the alternative is unimaginable. Peraton.
Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseur. This is Matt here, as always, and I am joined by a very special guest tonight. I have Jacob Gustafson, who wrote the recent novel, or the recent book, Awesome Action, Volume 1, a journey through the wild world of so bad they're good movies. Jacob, welcome on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought this was a really great read. I think there's two things about it that I thought were really good. I think the first thing is it works. You know, it's something that can be read cover to cover, but I also feel like it's like a reference guide that people can go back to from time to time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was my hope because, the world of hilariously quote unquote bad films, and by bad I just mean not traditionally considered good. The only bad film is a boring film in my book, but it's a minefield. There's a lot of ones out there that seem like they would be fun to watch and in reality are really not. So my hope is that if you pick up this book on action films and you're digging around on Amazon or YouTube or wherever, you find something that grabs your attention, that you think, oh man, that looks like a lot of fun, I wonder if it is, you could pull out the book and see if I cover it. And in the book I cover over 100 films of this ilk, so it's a pretty good number. And you could see what I thought about it, whether it was a drag or whether it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point too. I think about not calling a movie bad or something like that. And I think that's one thing too that for people that are curious and about your book, that I think Ty from Come Up It's Reviews, Ty and Brett, they always talk about how they treat the movies that they pick at with love, and so they might do a podcast where they'll pick all the movies that have the word kill in the title, or something like that.
Or cop.
Right, exactly. And so they will make a point to say, we're doing this with love, we're doing this to and I think it's the same idea. I always put it in a different form. I always think of it as how in a family the siblings can make fun of each other, but if somebody makes fun of one of the siblings, suddenly everybody kind of, it's like, no, you can't do that. And I think that's kind of the same thing with these movies, where it's like, you're in the family, you love these kind of movies, you can poke fun at them, you can make jokes about them because overall you love the movies, you enjoy them. And I think that's a different thing from people who just want to rip on a movie.
Right, and that's not the case here. I mean, I agree. I've never thought of it that way, but I agree. In my book, I specifically go over the fact that the book wasn't written as a discouragement to watch films like this. Films like Samurai Cop and Miami Connection and Road to Revenge and Deadly Prey. Those films are films that I think you should watch because they are a lot of fun. It's not that the book isn't where I'm sitting up in my ivory tower making fun of everything and elevating myself above these filmmakers. Quite the contrary. I have a lot of respect for them. It takes a lot of effort and money and guts, a whole lot of guts to make a film. To see it through to its end, and then to not only finish it, but to get it distributed, put it out there, and let people make fun of it or hate it or whatever. You really have to put yourself out there to an extreme degree in order to make a film. And I have a lot of respect for all these people. I don't think that they should necessarily be denigrated, but we can be honest about the fact that they are fun, and maybe they're not fun for the reasons that the filmmakers intended. But they are a blast, and they're so much fun to watch with friends. And I feel like these are the types of films that bring people together, and that's also what I really appreciate about them. This isn't these aren't the type of films that you necessarily would want to watch by yourself, nor are they the film that you invite your friend over and you both are quiet the whole movie, and then afterwards you discuss the philosophical points. They're films that demand to be commented on. Like they do wild and crazy things that were unexpected, and you have to say something, and you want to cheer, and you want to boo the villains, and you want to have a lot of fun with it. It's almost like melodrama, like going to the melodrama, or like a more interactive theater. And for that reason, I feel like they really bring people together. I mean, that was my whole intent with the book, was to present the book, to give instructions on how to put together an awful awesome movie night where you can watch something like Samurai Cop and have a blast with your friends, and they'll keep coming back. You'll keep wanting to. People will be begging you to host more of them because they're so much fun to watch together.
Yeah, and it's funny, you mentioning the bad movie night thing. One thing I think that's really great about your book as well is, like, for example, Skyscraper is one that I hadn't seen before, and my wife enjoyed the Anna Nicole Smith the Anna Nicole Smith reality show that was on however long ago, and I thought, oh, this might be a fun one for her to watch with me, because generally she doesn't watch the movies with me. I just watch them on my own. And I read, what you had to say about it, and realized, like, okay, no, there's some kind of Skinamax elements to this that probably my wife would not enjoy. So I think that's a good thing too. I mean, I think that's a good point that you bring up, and overall about the bad movie night, that it is a good thing to screen it ahead of time. What are some other things that you talk about that make for a good bad movie night? Because I think right now, where people are social distancing, I think a lot of people are doing them virtually, but it's a really great kind of way to bring people together, to kind of queue up a movie on Netflix and have everybody comment about it on Zoom or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. I'm one of those people. I regularly have people over at my house. Usually every Saturday night, I have friends come over and we watch something ridiculous, and we have a good time. And because of the what we're going through right now, that obviously isn't possible. And so through another podcast, No Budget Nightmares, they were starting to do movie watch parties with a program called Cast, and that's Cast with a K, and you can screencast anything. So it doesn't matter what it is. It works with anything. It just mirrors your screen. So if you want to do something on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or YouTube, or something that you have on file or a DVD, it doesn't matter. You can do it all, which is really nice, and it's free. And so I've been doing that with my friends that are technologically able to. And the other neat thing about it is that up to 20 people can actually talk. You can talk to each other via your microphone. So I can still talk to my friends, and we can comment and laugh, and I can hear their laughter, and I can hear their voice, and that really helps. It really helps with people that I'm used to getting together with regularly, to hear their voice. It really does make a big difference. And as far as how to figure out what is going to work for a movie night with friends, I mean, the general guidelines are just simply like, know who you're inviting over, and know what they're interested in, and more importantly, what offends them. You don't want to invite over people who are like easily offended by, for instance, like nudity, and then show something that has a bunch of nudity in it, because you're just going to be embarrassed, right? If you're with a mixed crowd, obviously stuff that's sleazy isn't really going to go over very well. Another thing that's common with like Indonesian action movies would be, animal violence. Make sure that what you're watching either doesn't have it, or make sure that your audience isn't going to be really upset by it. You have to know who's coming over, and you have to know them well enough to kind of know what will offend them, or at the very least, you need to know the film so that you can say, hey, let's get together. I'd like to watch this movie. I think it'll be fun. Just fair warning, there's a ton of gore in it. You're not going to show the story of Ricky to people who, rarely watch rated R movies, because they'll like leave your house and they'll never come back. So, you need to at least warn them of what they're getting into. And as far as like getting it going and kicking it off, if you're interested in doing it, hit the Pantheon movies first. Hit the bona fide, the ones that are just definitely going to go over well, that are a lot of fun, like Samurai Cop, Miami Connection. A lot of PM Entertainment movies go over very well, especially when you're talking like from 94 to like 96. That era of PM Entertainment are generally a lot of fun. And another recommendation would be, if you want people to comment on the movie, if you want to talk about it, you have to start it. You have to start making comments. You have to start making jokes. You have to start saying things, because the people that come over are probably going to expect it to be the same kind of viewing experience that they've always done before, where they're expected to be quiet. They know they're supposed to be quiet. But if you kind of kick it off and kind of get them into the general mood of it, they'll start having fun and start commenting back. The way that I got started was I moved to a town where I didn't know anybody, and I was working from home. So I couldn't even befriend coworkers because I was at home. And I realized I really wanted to have friends. Obviously, I wanted to spend time with people. And I thought, if they're cool enough to watch, Troll 2 or any of the top tier, Hard Ticket to Hawaii, like anything like that, if they're cool enough to sit down and have a good time with that, then they're definitely somebody I would like to spend time with regularly. And so I decided, well, I need to set up an opportunity to meet these people, because no one was doing that. I live in a small town. Like, there's almost nothing that happens here. We do have one movie theater, but that's about it. There's really not much of anything here. Which isn't knocking it. It's just the way it is. It's a small town. And there was a coffee shop nearby that had a movie night where they watched very serious movies, very, very serious. And I went to it, and it wasn't fun at all. I didn't enjoy it. But I realized, hey, they got this TV in here. They got kind of a private space. I wonder if they would let me show like a bunch of goofy, fun, ridiculous, over-the-top movies. And they did. I talked to them about it, and they were open to the idea. And so I started showing them once a week. And over time, I built a very devoted crew of people who would just come just because they wanted to socialize. They didn't even care what the movie was anymore. They're like, oh, we trust you. You always show good stuff. It'll be fun. And that's how I met the majority of the people that I hang out with now. And it was great. It was a great way to meet people from different walks of life, different ages, all kinds of interesting people. It was really fun. I did it for about 3 years. And so I screened about 150 films, because I did it every single week, except on like holidays. Like if Christmas was that week on that day, then I wasn't going to do it. But if it was the day after Christmas, well, then I was probably going to do it.
You didn't do elves or anything like that for Christmas?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, no. I showed Elves. I did Jack Frost 1 and 2. I did Santa's Sleigh. Mm-hmm. I did Santa with Muscles, but that one was really weak. That one did not go over well with Hulk Hogan. Yes. I always try to find some holiday themed movie for sure. Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, Mitch from a Video Vacuum, he introduced me to Elves. I had never seen it, and yeah, what an experience. I mean, that one. See, that's one. Like for example, I watched that. I thought, oh, this would be kind of a fun one for me to show with my wife as well. And then there's a cat that gets killed in one of the scenes, and I knew that would. That was too much for me even, and I knew that was no good. And I think that's a good point that you make about this. I mean, I think the idea of doing it like that, like I always, for me, my movie nights were always, either people like I would have my friends and we would watch them, and then they would know somebody that they would bring along, and we'd introduce them to something like Bridge of Dragons. The idea of doing it with all new people just sounds so exciting to just be like, I'm going to show Miami Connection, just see how it goes. And sure enough, everybody I don't know how you can't love Miami Connection or something like that. But I love the idea of just going out there and doing it and having all those people just, really take to it like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was nerve-wracking for sure. It took a while for it to catch on. I almost gave up really early on, in fact. Like after like the second time, I was like, okay, there's like almost nobody showing up, and the people that do aren't particularly friendly. And it just so happened, I think it was on the third week that I did it, a woman showed up with her young son, and I had a blast with both of them. I was like, well, this is a lot of fun. This is cool. And so I kept at it basically because they were like, well, we definitely want to come back next week. This was a lot of fun. And I thought, all right, well, I'll keep it going for a little bit. And then, yeah, it sort of exploded at one point. I was having like tons of people, and it kind of like ebbed and flowed. Some weeks, all of a sudden, there wouldn't be hardly anybody, and I didn't know why. Like there was really no rhyme or reason for it. It seemed, but it was fun, and it just I wasn't able to do it anymore because I simply didn't have time. I went back to school to continue my education, and I just didn't have time. I just couldn't do it anymore. And honestly, the majority of the people who were showing up anyway were people who I was having over at my house. Yeah. So I was like, well, we're hanging out at my house anyway. Why am I going through all this trouble to do it here when we can just do it at my house permanently? So eventually it just turned into that. And then it was sort of, my wife would meet somebody, or we'd meet somebody through our kids, and come to find out, the husband likes dumb action movies. And I was like, well, let me tell you, you should hang out with me because it's fun. And yeah, it is a really good time, and I'm really glad that Cast exists so I can still do it. It really does. And the cool thing with Cast now, because obviously it's online, now I can get a hold of some of my friends that moved away, who are living in different parts of the country right now, or like old college friends and stuff, and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Like, geography doesn't matter anymore. If you can show up, show up. And so that's been cool too.
Yeah, I think that is really exciting because, I always thought, because I used to do this bad Netflix movie night thing back when Twitter was kind of becoming a new thing. I think like 10 years ago now it was. But we would go on Twitter with the hashtag, whatever it was, bad Netflix or something like that. But the problem is when you're on one of those things, you've got to type out your comment that you want to make about the movie, and that's completely different from being able to just say in real time, like, oh, look at that, the butt of that gun completely missed that guy's head, but at least it still hit him or something. Whatever joke you're making about what you're seeing there, to be able to do it in real time is what I think was what creates the real community, because it's all happening right there. You're riffing in the moment.
Right. Yeah, and because I'm casting it, we're all seeing it at the same time versus telling everybody, okay, hit play now. Right. Well, everyone's going to be a little bit out of sync. Yeah. But when I'm able to do the cast, and again, I can keep the cool thing. Not that I'm not sponsored by Cast. I'm just enjoying using it. But you can go public or private, which is nice too. If you go private, then you just send out invites to your friends, and you don't have to worry about anybody like jumping in, which is cool too, that are gonna like ruin it for everybody. Right. Or you can go public if you're brave. I'm not that brave, so yeah, it's something. We got to do something to keep connected during this time, and generally I think movies just bring people together. They bring people together who maybe wouldn't normally have associated with each other because they don't really have anything else in common except their love of film. And that can help build bridges between all sorts of different people, which I think is fantastic too. Most people like movies to some degree at least. And I think that also most people, if they're in the right environment, they would love the films that I feature in my book. Um, you don't have to be like a crazy, super dedicated cinephile to get a lot of fun out of a silly action movie that everyone is like talking about. Oh my gosh, what that explosion was like ridiculous. Like I think a lot of people can enjoy a film like Action USA. Like it's just so ridiculous and over the top and cartoonish that I feel like these movies are like a little kid's painting that they put like a lot of time and energy and effort in, and where like you can see that, okay, clearly it's not necessarily quote unquote well made, but there's so much passion there, and you do love that picture so much. Like you're just like, that this is awesome. I'm so glad that you made this for me. I'm gonna put this up on the wall because I love it. It's the same kind of love that I have for these films where there's just so much passion on display, and I think that really is what separates ones that are fun to watch and ones that are not as fun to watch, when you know that the people making them are earnest, when they're really, really trying hard and they have a passion for it. It can't help but come through. I mean, when they're having a good time making a movie, like you can feel it.
Yeah, and one thing is, we're going to be talking about David Pryor's films here coming up, and I think one thing that struck me when I was watching Mankillers for this episode was that he is a professional director. I mean, I guess he kind of went out to Hollywood on a whim from Jersey to go out there with Ted and decided to make movies with a group of people. But he makes shots and he does things in the way like he's at least trying to mimic a professional director. And I think with the modern direct-to-video movie that's different from those late 80s, early 90s ones was that nowadays it's like, okay, let's just have a stunt guy be the director, whoever be the director, and then we'll just get the, make sure they have a good DP or good cinematographer that gets the shots, and then we'll edit it all in post and everything. And there is something about a movie. I think it seems like the pendulum started to shift back towards directors with people like Keone Waxman or Jesse Johnson.
Yeah, Jesse Johnson.
Yeah,
I love his stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you watch a movie like Avengement or something like that where you can. It doesn't have the same kind of nostalgia feel. Like Mankillers is great because. Or any of the the David Pryor films are great from that era because it's not just that you've got all these little elements that happen in it, but it's also like if there's no action going on at that moment, and maybe the dialogue is just kind of blah, it's just kind of you can just tell that Dave Pryor wrote it and as quickly as he could and just wanted to get it out there without proofreading it.
Yes.
You're still seeing guys with mullets, you're seeing like mustaches, you're seeing all these hilarious things from that time that. Of course, when we were living in that time, all those things were normal. But now you look back and you're like, this stuff's hilarious. So there's like an added element that makes it fun. And again, like you said, once you set in motion the fact that we're not all sitting here to just watch and listen to this movie, but we're interacting with this movie that, and again, if the it's one of those movies where they're, PM Entertainment or Action International Pictures where they're trying to get as many movies out as quickly as possible, so they're kind of like, okay, let's do one reread through the script and that's good enough, and if we leave things in there that don't work, we're going to go with it. You also don't have to sit there and hang on every word of the script.
No, no, you could turn the sound off on Mankillers and you'll know exactly what's happening. Like it's they're very visual films for sure. And all of AIP's stuff is generally like that. And PM Entertainment is very similar to AIP, except it's maybe a bit more polished and certainly a lot more outrageous.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting 'cause I used to always think of it like in tiers, where it was like, okay, Canon was one, and then PM Entertainment, and then AIP. But now I've kind of been watching, because for a while I've been meaning to get into more AIP films, and it kind of got into it, because part of it was, it's like, okay, Dolph Lundgren makes 3 movies a year, and it's like I got to try to keep up with the 3 Dolph Lundgren movies that in the 3 Seagals and whatever. And these, I'd only do so many movies from the past, and leave others behind. And I realized, like, no, those movies from the past, even if they aren't good, they're still good in a way.
They're
again,
entertaining.
as long as they're not boring. Yeah,
they're fun. They're not boring. They're not boring. Which, frankly, modern direct-to-video stuff can be a minefield of boredom. I'll be honest. Like, that's why a guy like Jesse Johnson, he gets a name, because every single one of his films are, well, except maybe his like really early ones, but all the stuff that he's doing with Adkins is like, they're all really entertaining. They're all fun. They may not always work as well as maybe he had thought, but they're never boring. They're not boring at all. And I think that's part of the problem with direct-to-video and why it was so maligned, is because there were so many films that were boring, that were just like, oh my God, this is such a drag. Like, think of all the garbage that Troma distributed. Not necessarily that they made, but stuff that they bought and released. Right. I mean, oh my God, there's ones that are just so boring. And then especially when you're talking like mid-90s, late 90s action, where everyone is really fatigued. There's not a lot of originality. And especially like post Pulp Fiction, like, oh my God. Oh, yes. Talk about bad scripts with like horrible dialogue, because everyone's trying to be Tarantino and it doesn't work at all. So, it is a bit of a minefield, but because we have the internet now, we can now go, oh, wait a minute. Turns out most PM Entertainment movies are really entertaining. They've got some dogs too, but generally speaking, their batting average is very high. Canon's is even higher, and then AIP is pretty high too. Like, so you can look at the labels, you can find out, okay, what other movies are put out by these companies, because I want to search them out. Whereas other studios were a lot more patchy, and less, very, very much so, less reliable.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things that I think really came into the fold with like kind of DTV in the 2000s, where it really starts to kind of go down a bit, is I think you got a lot of guys, and I can even blame, I'm Dolph Lundgren, I'm a huge fan of, but I think even he may have been guilty of this, and Seagal and some of them, where they wanted to make something that was more serious, or and so what ends up happening is, of course, issues happen, right? I think as you were saying, and I think it is probably the number one sin. I think for anybody that does this, that watches direct-to-video movies or B movies, the number one thing that they'll say is boredom, or making anything boring is the greatest sin that you can have in a movie. I think it's the only thing a movie can't overcome is being boring. I also have this feeling about, Roger Corman always said a movie shouldn't be longer than 88 minutes, because that's like, 11 reels. And so if you make it 90 minutes, you got to make it 12th reel. And I always feel like anything above 88 to 90 minutes, anything beyond that is borrowed time. That a movie that goes past that limit.
Oh yeah, especially if it's 100 minutes. That's like, whenever I see that, whenever I'm looking for an awful awesome flick and it's 100 minutes, it's like, it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be good. It's gonna be flabby as hell, because they didn't trim it down to it being lean. It's probably gonna be sloppy. It's not gonna be fun. So I always approach a film that I'm hoping to be awful awesome with a lot of trepidation if it's over 90 minutes. I'm totally with you. Like, if it's 80 to 85 minutes, I am so sold.
Yeah, I mean, it's really borrowed time. There's really no like Jean-Claude Van Damme has 2 new Kickboxer movies out, and I've seen one of the 2, and they're both like in that 2-hour range. And I just don't know that there's any Kickboxer story that can't be told in 88 minutes. That there's there's not anything in the Kickboxer canon that can't be covered in that short period of time.
And that's what makes Bloodsport so good, is because it's really, really tight. There's the only thing wasted in a film like Bloodsport is the only the subplot of him with the reporter.
Yeah.
Like that's really the only thing that could be trimmed that was totally unnecessary on every level, unless you want to see Jean-Claude's butt.
Right.
Then it's necessary to show off his magnificent butt.
Right.
That's why that's such a, for me, Bloodsport is like the high watermark when it comes to tournament films. I watched it all the time when I was a kid, and it just does so many things right, and it's lean. It's lean, and that's, we don't need a bloated movie that's just filled with needless melodrama, which is really the problem when you're talking with about like a lot of sci-fi movies on the Sci-Fi Channel. They're full of bloat. They're full of just needless melodrama between characters that you couldn't care less about. It's all about the problem, the conflict, and those things don't do anything but fill time. They're just filler, and it's obvious that they're filler.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a great, like, if you're like, Ozu or somebody like that, yes, you can get away with making a movie that's all, all melodrama and all just people talking back and forth and make it compelling,
Oh, of course. But, Steven Seagal is never going to make a movie like that.
Exactly.
His films do not need to be that long, ever. I mean,
No.
it takes a real master, which, frankly, I don't know how you feel about the Fast and the Furious movies, but I have to say the fact that they're like 2 hours long and pretty dang compelling shows how well written they are. That as dumb as they are and as stupid as they are, they're very they're written with the mind of cramming in as much action as possible. They are actually well written. It's very difficult to write a film. It's really difficult to write a screenplay that is satisfying.
Yeah.
It's very, very challenging, and it's even more challenging if you have no sense of like character, which is fine. Your movie can be a dumb tournament movie, but don't try to make it something that it isn't. It's a fun tournament movie. Let it be what it is. Don't try to sell me on something else.
Yeah. Well, one thing it's interesting you mentioned about this, because, as we get into talking about the David Pryor films, when you talk about the Fast and the Furious movies, the one thing about those that I notice is, I don't call it an issue, and you can maybe even say the same thing about the Marvel movies too, is that, if I'm in my bedroom and if I'm in our bedroom and our TV in there is not huge in our bedroom. It's good size for our bedroom, right? Because we don't need it to be so huge. But if I watch, like, I just watched the Hobbs and Shaw movie, for instance, on there, and it really is made for the big screen or for people that have like huge, flat screens. Like it you can feel that, like, when Dwayne, when The Rock is like hanging off of a cliff from a helicopter, that it was really meant for it to be coming at me through a screen. Whereas a lot of, like these, AIP films and the PM Entertainment films, they were made, for the small screen. They were made for smaller screens than what we have.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and I feel like that's another advantage to those movies now, is that so many of them are on Prime or Tubi or streaming services like that, so you can get them for for free or for what you're already subscribed to, which helps. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. I mean, I think that the Fast and the Furious movies, I can't help myself from watching those. I think they get it as right as I think anybody is getting it right nowadays. And I think the problem is again with those is they're hard for a movie night, because I think 90 minutes is a great time to for bringing people over. You're not asking for a huge commitment if you say, hey, the movie's going to be 90 minutes. And the other thing too is, like, if you have to, you can just cut to that end. Like Mankillers has a really great finale that you don't want people to miss. But if you feel like that middle part where they're just kind of walking around in the woods is a bit too much for you, I mean, I think Mankillers has enough action kind of throughout that you don't necessarily need it. But I think with a movie like that, 90 minutes, asking somebody for that amount of time, I mean, I when we do Bridge of Dragons, I think it's like 90 minutes. That tends to be one we do a lot. Or Showdown in Little Tokyo, I think it's like 75 minutes. You can even do things like stop and order food and come back and finish the movie, and you're still not having a really late night of it, which I think that's another advantage to movies like this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's respectful of an audience's time. We're busy. everybody's busy. Asking me to sit down for your 2.5 hour opus, man, it better be something pretty amazing. It better be something that's really going to blow my hair back and or is going to really make me think. It's got to be something impressive. It has to earn that runtime, and come on, a lot of most films don't.
No.
They wouldn't a film like Deadly Prey wouldn't benefit for being half an hour longer. Like
Right.
it just wouldn't. I think one thing when it comes to direct to video action, especially of like the 80s and 90s, is that when you look at that era, when you look at the era preceding it, it was all about horror. Horror was what was filling shelves. That's what everybody wanted. And as people got older, as that same audience, I think, got older, they moved into wanting to watch action films, didn't really want to watch the gory horror movies anymore as much. A lot of these movies are like dad movies. Like they're total like middle-aged man, like fantasy films. But they were sold on a star. Horror films weren't sold on a star. They were sold either by the director or by like the promise of gore, like the monster, that kind of a character. Whereas Another Nightmare on Elm Street, like only serious horror fans would pay attention to who directed every single one. They're paying attention to the fact that Freddy's in it. And the same thing goes to the action movies. It's like, I'm going to see the new Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Nobody ever is asking. No one was ever asking for the new David Pryor movie.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if anything, they'd want to see the new Ted Pryor movie. So it was harder to track films that way back in the day as well. Like like you said, you're gonna rent the new Dolph movie. You're not necessarily gonna rent the guy who directed the Dolph movie that you liked a whole lot, his next movie, because you're probably not gonna know what it is. You're not gonna be able to find it. You're not even gonna be aware of it, like unless he works with Dolph again, or he works with Jean-Claude, or he works with somebody that has that star power. And I think now in the internet age where everything is so easy to track, we can sit down and just watch a whole bunch of David Pryor movies. Whereas back in the video store day, you wouldn't have known. It would have been really hard to because it wasn't his name on the cover. That wasn't what was selling it, right? So like, someone like Jesse Johnson, you could put his name on the cover because people pay attention to that stuff a little bit more, I think, now than they did, 20, 30 years ago. They didn't pay attention.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because that's one thing I noticed when I started doing my blog with Albert Pune. He was someone where it was like I was doing movies, that had names in it because he worked with so many big names. It's like, this has got Ice-T and Christopher Lambert. Let me do this movie or whatever. And 4 or 5 movies in, I'm like, I've done a bunch of Albert. This Albert Pune name keeps coming up a lot, and so I went back and looked and saw like, wow, I had done a whole bunch of his movies, and Fred Olen Ray's another one like that, where it's like you just watch a whole bunch of movies and you realize, oh wow, they're all Fred Olen Ray. Whereas David Pryor was someone who I think, I would have seen his movies when I was younger without really like you said, you wouldn't know who it is. And I don't know if there's anything that would have been all that memorable beyond like things that happened in those movies. But then it was like when I got into the blog, people were like, you've got to go see Deadly Prey. You've got to watch Deadly Prey. And I did. And then it was like, okay, what else did this guy David Pryor do? Now it's like you go on IMDb, you click on the link and you want to see what else they do. Now it's great too with, a lot of his movies being on, with a lot of AIP flicks being on Prime, you can actually do that. You can look at more.
Yeah. So you can go from Deadly Prey to Mankillers to Killer Workout to The Final Sanction, and then you can watch his David Carradine movies. I was just looking him up today, and I'm looking at Letterboxd right now. I had no idea that he made a movie with Pamela Anderson.
He did, yes. And the funny thing is that movie supposedly. Because I was looking that up as well. I think it's on YouTube. But what happened was she said that in the sex scenes in that movie, she was manhandled, I guess, like treated really roughly. And so there was a movie in 1996 that she was supposed to do. I can't remember what it was called, but I guess Kathy Ireland would do it. But she backed out of it, and the people sued her. And she cited her experience on that film as her reason why she backed out, whereas they said, no, you backed out because you want to do barbed wire instead. So,
wow.
the stuff that happens with these movies, I think that's another thing. You had mentioned about, you kind of with these movies there, there's a lot of work that goes into them, a lot of passion. But the other thing I realized, and I realized this in talking with Albert Pion, and I'm sure if I know David Pryor's passed away, but if we'd been able to talk to him about some of these, you find out that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that affects how a movie turns out, that the director really didn't have any say in. I think Pryor had more of a say in these films because he was working with David Winters, and he had more creative control over these. But Albert Pion, a lot of his movies, Cyborg is a big example that was taken away from him. And
for sure. Well, yeah. AIP wasn't it co-owned by Pryor? Wasn't he one of the owners of AIP? I think he was. And if that's the case, then yeah, he would have a lot of pull. And AIP was a small company who they were there to fill shelves as quickly as humanly possible, which is why he made so many movies a year.
Yeah, it's funny, like with Mankillers, for example, watching that one recently, and the one we're gonna talk about a bit. The cover of that makes it look like it's like an Andy Sidaris movie,
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it's like Julie Strain, Bruce Penhall, or whatever. But when you watch it, it's really almost like I don't want to say a sequel to Deadly Prey, but it feels like the second movie. Like if you watch Deadly Prey, Mankillers is a good second one to watch after. And of course, it's got William Zipp from who I love. I love seeing him in AIP films anyway.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. So for those of you who may not know, Mankillers is essentially David Pryor's riff on the Dirty Dozen. It's 12 incarcerated women who are put on a mission to take out William Zipp, who is a human trafficker / like cocaine dealer. Like he never deals it. He just does it a lot. Yeah. And his whole business model is awful. He pays this sleazy guy Jake to kidnap women, and then he passes off those women to someone who has a bunch of cocaine for human trafficking. But then he doesn't seem to do anything with the cocaine. He just seems to like snort it, I guess. And then they capture more women so they can get more cocaine. And it's like, listen, from a business model standpoint, this is not going to work. You need to turn that cocaine into money. That's the whole point, right? Like you need to stop. Like I get it. Maybe the first time you're getting a huge load of cocaine, you don't have any capital, so you're going to kidnap some people and like trade. But then that's like just what he does. It's like, no, you're gonna get caught like really fast. Yes, and then those Dirty Dozen girls, females, women who have no military training. They're just felons, and all of violent crimes as well. Like it's just like murder and assault and robbery with like a gun, and like these aren't white collar people or I don't know, like in the Inglourious Bastards, the original, all the guys who were sent on a mission who were like in trouble during the war, it was like for like desertion, or like they hit a commanding officer because the commanding officer was trying to send them all to their death. Like they're like sort of quasi honorable reasons for being in jail, but like these girls, it's just like nah, she just murdered somebody and she's just dead right. She's a murderer, and it's like, and then if they can pull it off, if they can overthrow or kill or capture William Zipp, then they get out. And like, should they really be getting out? Because they're super dangerous. Like,
yeah, well, they're super dangerous, and they've now been trained to be even more dangerous.
Yes, no, right. Yes, and they and that training was the training again, because we're talking about a dad movie, consists of wearing tank tops and little booty shorts. Okay, that's their outfit. And they have to do a lot of jumping jacks and a lot of running, and that's about it.
Yes.
Like, and throwing grenades.
Right. What do they call that? When they were talking about when Three's Company, when they were making Three's Company in the late 70s into the 80s, the jiggle factor.
Yes.
Yes, with Suzanne Summers. Right.
That was in this movie, bras are optional, but big hair is mandatory.
Yeah, if you look at the tags on IMDb, I don't know if you've ever looked at tags on IMDb because there are some hilarious ones. One of the tags on this one is nipples nipples visible through clothing or something like that.
Yes.
So apparently that's for people that are into that kind of thing, this movie has that. So
it does. It does. Although with that in mind, it is not an Andy Sedaris movie. There is actually no nudity in it at all.
Mm-mm.
Just women wearing little tank tops with no bra, and apparently it's 1,000,000 degrees in the forest because they are always drenched in sweat, like always. The entire movie, they never dry out ever.
Now, one woman who kind of is fully clothed for most of the film that I thought was really interesting to see in the film was Gail Fisher, who played Peggy on Mannix. I believe this is her last film that she ever did. I think she did a TV appearance after this, but this was her last film. And it's funny because I think for David Pryor, I think he was born in 55, for guys like that, they probably grew up with Mannix and those shows. And that was kind of what shaped them and what they would have in a movie. I mean, there were a lot of elements of this movie that feel Mannix-esque, like when Jake, the trafficker, catches the woman that escaped, and he's like telling her to say you want to fuck me or whatever, and she's like, because she thinks if she says that to him, then he won't kill her, but he kills her anyway. And there was some dark stuff that happened in Mannix. I remember in shows like that, Canon, Barnaby Jones and all those, and it's weird because when you watch a movie like this, you realize like some of these scenes, like I think if they'd had a chance to go through the script a little bit more, they might have written some of them out because they seemed a little bit too harsh or too much. Other things, it's like like you talk about William Zip with his character where he didn't have a good business model. I mean, not only was he trafficking women, but he was also killing them. And he makes this big deal about how these women are such important currency, where like Jake is like, if you want more girls, it's going to be double the price. And he's like, okay, well, I just brought you 3, so I guess what am I going to give you, 7 more? Okay. Oh, now I got to get you 8 because I've just killed one. So it's like, if they were worth that much money and that much cocaine, William Zip's just killing them too. And so, again, though, there are things that happen in the movie that I think it makes it more fun when that kind of, where you can make jokes about it, like, why is William Zip doing this?
Well, and not only that, but like, okay, so apparently whatever it is they're doing, it doesn't pay well because they're living in like the worst shanty, crappy, like corrugated aluminum, and like it's awful. Like they're so bad. Like they had no time to build sets. And actually, it's interesting on this film. Okay, so Ted Pryor, this is one of the few films that he's not in of David Pryor's, but he does have a credit. He's like the set builder. So he's the one that made the crappy like shanty sheds. It was Ted Pryor.
That's amazing. I mean, it's because I think he does. I think William Zip makes a comment at one point, like, we're about to have some big deal. I think that's why he's telling Jake he needs more girls because he wants to get out of that place that they're in.
Yeah, and that's understandable. And if he would stop snorting up all their cocaine, they could probably do that a lot faster.
Yes.
He also sports a sweet man perm.
Yes.
His hair is very permed in the movie, which I enjoyed a lot, especially at the beginning of the film where he's wearing an all-white suit. He looks totally sleazy, and he's got his tight man perm going on, his mullet man perm. So good. And this is the type of film where and you can totally do this with PM Entertainment movies as well, but at the beginning of the movie there's a car chase. Mm-hmm. And the second they showed the cars, it was like, oh, those cars aren't making it through this movie. Like, they are so beat down. Like, one car didn't even have headlights. Like, there were no headlights in the car. They were just taken out. It's just like, that car's getting smashed. Like, it's so obvious that they just went and like pulled him out of a junkyard and paid very little money, got him running, and then just like smashed him. And on a film of this budget, I kept thinking throughout the whole movie, and there's more egregious examples of this for sure. But it just there's this like this texture of dangerousness, of not that the movie, like, I'm not concerned about the characters, I'm concerned about the actors. Like, do you really trust that those explosions that they're setting off right next to you, that they did them right? Do you really? Because that's like right there. Like, yeah, that could blow your leg off. Like, you really trust that they're doing this right? And when they point a gun at you and fire, like, you really sure that the wadding isn't going to kill you like it did Brandon Lee? Like, there's a lot of trust that has to go on in making these films, because there's a lot of stuff that seems very, very potentially dangerous.
Yeah, and that's one thing too. Like, maybe when you see them recycling the same shots, or I think there's a couple bad guys that get killed more than once in the same shootout.
Oh, sure.
You almost feel like you're okay with that, because it means that it's less chance that anybody gets. It's like you'd rather they recycle the same shot of the machine gun shooting than risk anybody else possibly getting hurt.
Yeah, no, there's just, I don't know, just this feeling, especially with the cars. It's like, I feel like those cars are going to give you tetanus. Like, you're gonna, something bad is going to happen. For sure. The movie definitely riffs, like we said, on Deadly Prey. It has that same texture, that same vibe as Deadly Prey. I feel like Deadly Prey has a bigger budget than this one did. Deadly Prey had like some cool tanks in it. Like, they don't go anywhere, but they're there.
Right. Yeah.
And like it's more believable. All of Deadly Prey feels like it was a more maybe they just simply had more time. I don't know. Mankillers feels a lot more rushed, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Deadly Prey was more of the passion project, and I mean, you think even just the cast and crew that's in Deadly Prey, because it's not just that you have Ted Pryor in that one, but you also have Cameron Mitchell, who's kind of, he's a big name for us, I guess is what you would say. Maybe people listening to this know who Cameron Mitchell is, probably. But yeah, so you had some bigger names in there as well. So it might be that was the one that got the focus. And this one was like,
what's his name? The guy who's in charge.
Right.
Hold on, I'm gonna look it up because it's gonna drive me nuts. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, can't remember his name.
It's not Cameron Mitchell. I'm not seeing him on here. Huh. Well, and Troy Donahue's in it for a hot minute as well. So, yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, not to rag on Mankillers, but Deadly Prey is like the better film of the two. But if you really enjoy Deadly Prey, then you should definitely watch Mankillers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, Mankillers isn't a good place to start with Pryor, but it is fun.
Yeah, and I think a good one maybe too. I think Mankillers is a good. I think Mankillers just feels like a good follow-up to Deadly Prey. But I mean, Final Sanction with it's another Ted Pryor, and then Robert Zadar is so fantastic in that one.
I love that one.
Another ludicrous idea too. The idea that the Cold War is going to end because two guys are going to go at each other, in pitched warfare between each other, which is another fantastic idea that I loved. That's another great one there too. So I was looking. I think Deadly Prey has more of his mainstays too. It's got Fritz Matthews, David Campbell, and of course William Zipp's in that one as well. But yeah, I think for people, I mean, I think Deadly Prey is the one that you should use to get yourself introduced to David Pryor. But whether you go, I think as long as you know with Mankillers that you're not getting an Andy Sedaris film, I think that's a big thing.
It's actually pretty chaste. It's not like, there's a couple of moments that are sort of sleazy, like you mentioned, where Jake is like essentially sexually assaulting the woman. That's gross, and it feels really out of place. It feels like this shouldn't be in this movie. It doesn't fit the vibe of the film at all to me.
Yeah.
Like that felt like a major misstep, and that's one of those moments that would kind of like, in my opinion, like bring the party down. Like if you're watching
Right.
stuff,
Yeah.
like it's just sort of like, oh, it's gross. But then the scene that's totally lifted from Scarface, where someone's interrogated with a chainsaw,
Yeah.
that's fun because it isn't overly gruesome. Like it's just sort of ridiculous. That
Yes.
I enjoyed that scene. I thought that's fun.
Yeah, and you can see that the chainsaw's not running; it's not rotating,
Yeah.
which again, I'm fine with it. I'd rather not have the actors be in any kind of danger and just have him, kind of move the chainsaw off camera and have blood splatter than the idea that there's a real running chainsaw next to him that could hurt him. I'm perfectly fine with that the other way. One quick thing I wanted to mention as well is while I was watching the sort of that the scene where the women are going out there into the forest and they start attacking Zip's men, there was a guy who looked like Art Camacho where I was like joking. I was like, oh, look, Art Camacho's in this movie too. It's hilarious. And then I was going through the credits and I saw that it actually was Art Camacho. That,
Oh my God.
yeah, I couldn't believe it. PM Entertainment Mates. I mean, how many? Art Camacho. We figured out on the blog like he's been involved in at least 40 films, over 40 films, but originally I thought it was like in the 30s, and then I'm constantly finding movies that he was involved, like movies that I've done that he had some part in it that I didn't realize. But
Well, yeah, he did a lot of like stunt choreography and like that kind of stuff too. Like if he didn't direct a PM movie, he was usually involved with it, the action scenes in some way. So that's nuts that he's in it. That's so funny to think
Yeah.
that they. I mean, I suppose it makes sense. That whole world is probably a lot more like incestuous and insular than we think. Like,
Yeah.
there's not that many people who were out there trying to do this kind of stuff, and so of course they're going to run into each other. It does make sense, but that's nuts.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And yeah, because you think of some of the actors that did both. Like I know Robert Zadar did some PM films as well. I think he's known more for the AIP flicks, but I know he did some PM. Cameron Mitchell, he did a lot with Fred Williamson. Kind of in the earlier '80s. He's always a mainstay in these. It's always great to see him too. So yeah, you kind of see some of these people that kind of cross over. It's kind of they're making this many movies a year, and the movies aren't paying that much, so maybe you want to double up and work with as many people as possible.
Sure, and when you see someone like Robert Zadar with like a ton of film credits, it shows that he must have been very professional.
Yeah.
He must have been reliable, otherwise he wouldn't have continued to work. I mean, frankly, he's an impressive guy. When he was younger, he was in very good physical shape, and he always delivered too. That's what I love about Robert Zadar, is that it doesn't matter what movie he's in, he's going to give every ounce of everything he's got into that performance. I've watched quite a few Robert Zadar movies at this point, and he's never sleptwalked through any of them. And the only shame is that he's usually given some little tiny bit role. Like, he's often not given anything meaty, which is why The Final Sanction is so fantastic, is because he's given finally a nice substantial role.
Yeah, he's one that I think Samurai Cop. It's interesting because he's in that. He's like kind of your the one name in that movie. I guess Melissa Moore you can mention too as a name, but you wonder like what he would have been thinking as these scenes are unrolling, as he's going through the script and he's directing. But you're right, he's a professional actor. He's he doesn't let on that any of this stuff is ridiculous when he's making that movie, which to his credit, I think that makes it better that way, that he doesn't do that.
Well, he worked with Amir Shervan more than once. He did. Yeah. He also did Young Rebels, which I think is it's kind of a toss-up. And sometimes I feel like I like it better than Samurai Cop. I think Young Rebels is fantastic. It's a lot of fun. He was in that, and then what's the other one that he did? Anyway, he did another one where he's like a bank robber and stuff, and so he actually worked with Shervan 3 times. And Harold Diamond, who always did movies with Andy Sedaris, he did a movie with Shervan as well. He was in Gypsy, which was, I don't think ever released in ever, like in the United States. I think it was released like in France on VHS, but it was never released here. And the same company that put out Samurai Cop put out Gypsy. Like, you could actually watch it. And I think it's on Amazon. That one,
like Cinema Epic.
Yeah. They put out Gypsy, and that was the first time it had ever been released anywhere. And it's silly and stupid and fun, and it's definitely an Amir Shervan movie. Is it a lost gem? Maybe not so much, but it is fun if you like his stuff. But I mean, all these guys, they hopped around to whoever was paying, no matter what level they were at, and someone like Zadar always gave it his all. Ted Pryor is fantastic. I mean, I don't know if it's because he was almost exclusively working with his brother and they just knew how to work, but he's a really compelling guy. He's fun. That's why Deadly Prey is as good as it is because he's such a strong lead. And that's what makes Mankillers suffer, because none of the actresses are particularly compelling. None of them are memorable. I don't remember any of their names. I literally watched Mankillers today, and that was the third or fourth time I've seen it. I still don't remember any of their names.
Yeah. I mean, I always talk about like the Destro effect, where when I was growing up, when I watched G.I. Joe, I always thought Destro was the coolest. And I don't know if I would say William Zipp was someone that I was rooting for in the movie in that sense. Like, he wasn't cooler than them. But it is hard when your villain is the more compelling person, or the person that seems like the film is. I mean, I think there were aspects of the women, and we wanted them to defeat William Zipp because he just seems so bad. But you're right. Like,
they didn't have a lot of personality, and it's not necessarily the actress's fault. Like, Pryor didn't seem to know how to deal with an ensemble cast like that. Most of the actresses of that Dirty Dozen have no lines, or if there are any lines, they're just like a throwaway one line, or they're all talking at the same time, sort of a thing. Like, he never really gives the opportunity for them each individually to shine in any particular way. They're just attractive and willing to be in the movie, and he's just making it. There's definitely a sense of haste in the movie for sure. Like, we just got to get this thing done. Right. And so that's why, I mean, as much as William Zipp and his underling Jake are like super sleazy, they're compelling. They're memorable.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you mentioned that scene with Jake where you said that's the kind of the one thing that might make this bad for a bad movie. And I agree with you there. I mean, one of the things I felt with that scene was I felt like that was a result of not editing the script enough. That it was like, we got to get this script out. And so we're going to leave, a scene that looks good on paper. I mean, that probably looked good on paper for how to show how sleazy Jake was. It on screen sometimes it can be a lot harsher than it looks like in words. And I think sometimes when with a lot of these movies like this, whether it's sometimes with PM Entertainment where they just wipe out somebody's family, just to wipe out their family, and you're kind of watching and you're like, man, that poor kid just got shot in the head. That's horrible. But on paper it may not have sounded as bad, and they're rushing it out there, and then it happens. They're like, we just got to get this thing out there. I think that's sometimes what happens with these if they're too quick, is it's things that are uneven in it, and it's almost like if you can find the fun, I think that's what can save it.
So looking at his filmography, he did Deadly Prey, he did Killer Workout, that one's fun. That's a fun one. Killer Workout's great. He did Killer Workout, then he did Deadly Prey, and he did Mankillers, all in 1987. Yeah. And then in 1988, he did 4 more movies that year. And then in 89, he did 5. He did 5 movies in 89. And then in 90, he did 7 movies. Yeah. So like it's clear he was pushing himself to do more and more and more content. Which is why by the time you get to 95, he's back down to doing 2 movies, because I'm sure he was just like super exhausted. So I feel like Mankillers was maybe he wrote like Deadly Prey and Mankillers at the same time, got Deadly Prey done, and then went, okay, crap, I gotta hurry up and get another movie made. I don't know. It's interesting that it's at the beginning of this tremendous run of movies that he did back to back to back to back to back, and was just cranking out such a huge amount of movies in just a few years. It's not at the end of that run, it's at the beginning of the run.
Right, we're just starting with these, and it's interesting because you talk about guys like his brother Ted, William Zip, who people that worked with him a lot, and I think for the directors that pump out a lot of stuff like David Dakota with all of his Lifetime The Wrong movies, like almost every one of them has Vivica A. Fox in it, and I watched one recently because there was one that had Gary Daniels in it, and it's like you watch Vivica A. Fox and she knows exactly what David Dakota's doing at all times. And so it's like when everybody else is putting on eye protection because the loose ends are flying together and we're trying to protect ourselves, she's just acting her way through it like it's nothing. And I think that's maybe one area where Mankillers suffers a little bit, is that because it doesn't have and I guess at this point he's just starting, so that's a good point too, where he hasn't really kind of figured out himself, David Pryor, how he's gonna make these really quick movies. He probably learned lessons from Mankillers that he would, fix later on. But I think part of it was, he making sure he has more of his guys in the movies, or more of his actors and actresses that he works with a lot, because they know how to do it quickly the way he wants them to, and it becomes a little bit more of a consistent product.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that's why there aren't that many familiar faces in Mankillers, because he hadn't really gotten his stable together yet.
Yeah.
Gary Daniels, man, there's another actor who the quality of his films varies greatly.
Yes.
I love Gary Daniels. I love his films. They're so much fun. But some of the films that he made with Cine XL are like ridiculous. They're really fun, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love them because they're so like threadbare and like modestly budgeted, and he's another guy who's still making them. He's still cranking them out, still doing movies to this day, still trying to get things going. Forced to Fight is awesome. Has Peter Weller in it. Like, that one's ridiculous. It's so good. Like, I like that movie quite a bit. In fact, that was the first Gary Daniels movie I ever saw, was Forced to Fight. It was like on Netflix or something, and I thought, oh well, that sounds like something. And I like Peter Weller, and I was like, wow, this is great. This is so much fun. This is like a total old school throwback movie that just works really well. And that's when I started digging into his filmography. And then of course he worked with PM Entertainment in the early 90s and made some of their best films, like Rage. That one's so much fun.
Yeah, I know. Ty and Brett come up and talk about the 3 R's with Gary Daniels and PM Entertainment, right? You got Rage, Recoil, and Riot, and
all three of them.
Yeah, they're just amazing movies, and yeah, he's one who grinds it. He really does. I mean, he did Christian movies in Thailand, and with like Eric Roberts, and he's again, he did like this Lifetime Wrong movie thing. He did one that was really good recently called Skin Traffic that I enjoyed with Eric Roberts, and Mickey Rourke was in it, and Michael Madsen as well. That one was interesting because this movie was with human trafficking in it. That movie really did. And I think actually this movie did a good job with the human trafficking part of it too. It seems like a lot of movies that have human trafficking, it's really like like Seagal or Dolph, or somebody who rescues a woman from human trafficking and she falls in love with him because he's like protecting her or something, and that paradigm always happens. This movie doesn't have any of that. This movie, the human trafficking element is almost like a side line. It's it's like it's not there. But the skin traffic thing, they also didn't. It seemed like it was going to go in that direction and it didn't. And that was interesting. I think he seems like he does a lot of stuff. He grinds out a lot, and I think I always appreciate anybody who does a lot of work. I think that's always like you talk about with David Pryor's big list there. I always love that.
Yeah, let's see. According to Letterboxd, Gary Daniels has made 67 movies.
Yeah,
which is a fair number for a guy who's usually the lead. It's one thing if you're a supporting actor and you're in like 5 movies a year and you're just you're not the lead, but he's almost exclusively the lead in his film. So that is a whole lot. I'm trying to see. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, exactly. You got Gary Daniels being in something like City Hunter with Jackie Chan,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and the PM movies, but then he's also in Pocket Ninjas.
Right.
It's like, how did this happen? Oh man. Okay, so you're a Dolph fan. I'm looking at Gary Daniels' filmography. It reminds me, a few months ago I watched a movie with Dolph called Retrograde.
Oh boy, that was a horrible. Yeah, it was a. Yeah, where there's no real good Daniels in Dolph
Why would
interaction.
you put them in a movie together and not have them fight each other?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like what the hell was Gary Daniels even doing in the movie? He
Hmm.
wasn't given anything to do
Yeah.
except like hang out and just be there. Like he's just a supporting actor and he's not particularly interesting. He wasn't given anything. Yeah, God, the movie's
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
really, really awful. Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah.
so I'm just looking through his filmography because there are some there's some gold and then there's some less than gold. I mean, that's the thing about Daniels. He's got some legit movies that are like, wow, this is a lot of fun, and then he's got ones that are like, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? Like this
Right.
movie's hilariously bad. Like Replicator, that one's like, I don't know how they got him to be in it. It's
Right.
really
Yeah.
really bad.
Yeah. I think it's one like Dark Secrets. I think it's a bad one, or Black Friday. I remember was, but then he would do something like, Blood Moon, which is kind of a funny one, but also has, really great action in it.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
it's got low rent Eddie Murphy, Chuck
Right.
Jeffries in
Chuck
it too.
Jeffries, exactly. Yes. Wait,
Who's
look,
awesome. I like Chuck Jeffries. I mean, but
yeah.
he's clearly trying to be Eddie Murphy like in every single movie, except he can actually fight. So in a way, he's actually better than Eddie Murphy.
Right, and the funny thing is, I think Blood Moon he doesn't fight as much as I thought. Like Honor and Glory that I saw recently that he did with Cynthia Rothrock. He's like fighting in that one, and it is interesting to see like how sometimes movies they were like, oh, he can be Eddie Murphy. We want more of him being Eddie Murphy than we want him fighting. But it's like, no, he can fight. Like have him fight.
Yeah, let him loose. He's great. He's a great martial artist and he can sell it well and he's awesome. Yeah, he's he's another one of those interesting characters that you run into when you start digging deep
Yeah,
into this stuff. And I mean, I think something that we've definitely spoken to is the interconnectedness of these. Like
yeah,
as soon as you start digging into the direct-to-video world, as you know, because that's your bread and butter, you start to see just how connected everything is. That there aren't that many people doing these types of films, and they are definitely. It's like a spider web. It's like as soon as you jump onto one, then you can connect to another, and then it becomes a really fun rabbit's hole to go down. You're like, oh wow, there's like so many different avenues and different things, and you start seeing the same actors popping up in films that you never anticipated them being in, and yeah, when you could start picking out like supporting actors or like
right.
people who have like two lines in a movie, and you're like, oh, that's that guy. He was in this movie who also had that. Then man, then it, then
Yeah.
it's then it's really happening.
Yeah, and I think, bringing it back to the beginning where we were talking about your book, I think this is a really good, thing for people to consider when it comes to your book is that I think your book is a really great way to kind of get into that spider's web, like that, being able to page through and, like whether you're going through your streaming service and you see a movie and you're like, oh, I wonder if I should try that one, or, you just kind of go, at random through, the different ones and be like, let me try this one, or, let me see, what else is in here from, David Pryor, if we did the Deadly Prey one or something. I think your book is a really great investment for people that are looking to kind of delve in and try it, but also people who have been watching movies like this for a long time. I think it's still a great resource because one, it's been, how long has it been since a lot of us have seen certain movies like these? What kind of made me realize that your book is a really great reference resource was actually I had started reading it and then I put it down. I was going to come back to it, and then something came up about Double Target, which is in your book, and I was like, oh, I need to get more Miles O'Keefe on my blog. I should check out Double Target. And then I realized that I'd actually reviewed it. So I had completely forgotten that I'd even reviewed it. It had been that long. But I think this is, I think that's maybe kind of bringing it back to that. Your book, I think, is something that people should, look at in a way like that, it is a really great way to get into all of this stuff. And right now a lot of people are collecting. People are buying VHSs, buying DVDs, and I think an investment in your book is a good way to add to their collection. I think it's the same. If you're thinking about buying DVDs or VHSs, it's it's the same. I see it as the same way, the same kind of investment in their collections.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it's I'm hoping that it'll be somewhat of a roadmap. Like you'll start digging in. I had colleagues who were interested in film, but watched more highbrow stuff. And I told them about the book, and they chose to buy it, which was really nice of them. And then they started flipping through, and it's funny. Both of these two colleagues, both happened upon Samurai Cop.
Yeah.
And said, hey, I just read your review about Samurai Cop, and I think I need to see it. And I said, well, it's on Amazon. You can watch it right now. And then a couple days later, they were texting me back and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that movie exists. Like, that was so much fun. Me and my wife watched it, and we were just having a blast with it. That was so great. And then, then they were texting me later like, oh, I watched this other one from your list, or like, I think I got to watch more of these. And so that's like the whole purpose. That's the whole purpose of me writing the book, is to encourage people to watch more of them and to know which ones to avoid. There's a couple of PM Entertainment movies that I review in the book that are not good, that are not fun, that are kind of boring. And just because it has their logo on it doesn't mean that it's going to be a bona fide winner. And I tried to point that out too. I didn't necessarily want the book to be nothing but A+ movies, simply because then that makes it more questionable. It's like, do you really have, me as an author, like, do you really have taste? Or do you just like everything that you see? And so I feel like it's important to have contrast movies in there too. Like, well, this one is not fun, and this is why it's not fun. This is why you don't want to watch it, or this one's too sleazy. The second movie or the other movie that Anna Nicole Smith did with PM Entertainment, To the Limit, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Skyscraper is like a little sleazy. Like, yes, there's definitely some gratuitous stuff in it, but To the Limit is like so much worse. Like, there's so much more sleaze in it. I actually have that on VHS. I got it at a Goodwill for like 25 cents, and it's on a green VHS tape, which is cool. But like, oh my gosh. And like, every man that she sleeps with in the movie is like twice her age. like she sleeps with Joey Travolta, who's like John Travolta's older brother. And it's just like, oh God. Like, if you ever wanted to see Anna Nicole Smith naked with a middle-aged man repeatedly in a movie, that's your movie. But like, you got to know that before you go in, so you don't show it to a bunch of people and have them be like, well, that was not fun for us. It was fun for me. Frankly, I just fast forwarded through it when it got too much. It was like, okay, come on, like, let's move on, guys.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is that, in our in modern age here, I mean, time is as much of a commodity that's important, or a valuable commodity, as money. And so I think, for somebody who's looking to come up with movies for a bad movie night, again, like, reading your what you were saying about Skyscraper, where, talking about some of those gratuitous sex scenes. Okay, I know that's not a movie that I'm going to screen for my friends, so I won't even watch it right now. I mean, I watched it for the blogs, that's different. But if I were doing it for a bad movie night, I would say, okay, I'm going to look at something else. And I think that's another thing too, is that your book can help save people, save time if they're looking for a bad movie night movie, where they can look and say, like, okay, I might like this movie. This might be fun for me to watch by myself, but it might not do the trick for for having a mixed company. So maybe I'll look at something else. I think Samurai Cop is one with the bacon grease scene, where that one, when I watched it on a little tiny TV, when I first reviewed it, that bacon grease scene looked a lot more vicious than it did when I watched it on a big flat screen more recently, where I was like, no, this looks ridiculous. You can tell he's just dumping water on her and she's screaming. But if you don't have a good screen, it can look like it's bacon grease and it's really bad. But I think once you can see that it's water, I think that would be a really great. It would. People would get a kick out of it.
It is still like a little. It is a button pusher, though. You're right. Yeah. It is, and it doesn't. Again, it's another scene that doesn't fit in with the mood of the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And that can be a big bummer, and it can be a deal breaker for some people, and you need to know. And I tried to note things that I felt were pushing a boundary that would make a film not fun to watch. Angel Fist is one that I screened publicly. I'll admit it, even though I wasn't supposed to, but I did. Copyright laws. I had it on VHS, right. And I was watching it. I always had my hand on the fast forward button. Like in any movie that I was watching, it's like I might have forgotten about something. I better, just in case. And one of my friends who was going to the movie night, he needed a lift. He's like, oh man, I'd like to come, but I need a ride. And I said, well, I already started the movie, but I guess I'll just give the remote to somebody else and I'll leave and come back. Cause I'm like, whatever, I've watched this before. Like, it's not about me watching it. It's about me sharing it with you. Like that's what this is. It's me. I'm sharing this with you. I don't really care if I have to miss some of the movie or not, because that's not the point. The point is for you to see it. And so I went and picked him up, and when I came back, my friend, the other guy that I gave the remote to, he's like, oh yeah, thanks for that. You didn't tell me that there was a whole nude fight scene and like all this other stuff that happens in the movie that I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. I'm so sorry. He's like, yeah, that was ridiculously embarrassing, and your remote didn't work. And like, so I had to like get up and like run over to like the VCR and like fast forward physically. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I'm so sorry. So, it's like moments like that are like really embarrassing that can hopefully be avoided by reading the book. Like, okay, if you make sure you know what you're getting into. Right now, I'm currently working on the first volume of horror. Oh. So that'll be the next one. This is action volume 1. Then I'm going to do horror volume 1. Then I'm going to do sci-fi volume 1. And then I'm going to circle back around and do a volume 2 of action, and then horror, and then sci-fi. Because I feel like I could keep this going for a long time, because there's just so much out there that's why I wrote the book too. Was I was having a great time watching all this stuff with people at my movie night and just having fun, and then I was also watching them by myself or with my wife, and I was like, gosh, I'm watching an awful lot of these really trashy films. And I went to film school. I was a film major. And I'm not watching anything highbrow at all. It's just like all cheesy stuff. And I thought, man, I should really do something productive with this. Like, I'm watching them and nobody's really reviewing them with this lens, with the lens of, is this going to be fun to watch with my friends or not?
Yeah.
It was really hard. It's hard to go like on the Internet Movie Database or even Letterboxd and find reviews that will tell you that or not. Some will be like, oh, this is like the worst, dumbest thing I've ever seen. And to me, I'm like, well, that's kind of a green light. You're not discouraging me here, and so it's hard to find reviews that are looking at the film with that kind of criticism as, am I going to have a blast with my friends or not? And so that's why I decided to kind of compile them all in one place to make it easier for people to find them, because again, I've been burned so many times by reading reviews online and then watching something and then going, gosh, this isn't what I wanted.
Yeah.
This isn't the type of film that works with a crowd. I thought I knew what it was, but I didn't, and this didn't work. So my intent is to help people navigate the minefield that is bottom of the barrel trash to find the good little nuggets that are in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like you've definitely done it, and I think it's exciting to know that you've got more volumes to come. I figured you had another action one coming, but the fact that you've got horror and sci-fi, I think for now with the proliferation of streaming services and different places to go get things, bargain bins that used bookstores and things like that for VHS, having guides like this, I think, really helps people to give them an idea of what they can look at. And so I think that's one thing. I think your book is definitely worth reading cover to cover, but I think also it is something that when people buy it, it's going to be a reference tool for them down the road. And I think that's what really makes it a good investment.
Yeah, I mean, I've done all the work. I've done all the work as far as watching, hundreds of these films with the intent of it being something. Is this something that is worthy of watching with my friends that we can comment on and hoot and holler and have a blast with? Or is it just boring, or is it, upsetting? I've done all that work. And now anybody who wants to get the book can reap the benefit of knowing exactly which ones to go to if they're looking to do the same thing. And I highly recommend anybody who's been listening to me yammer on, do it. Get some friends together. And if you don't have any friends that would want to watch this kind of stuff with you, that's okay. I didn't either. Look for opportunities for you to do it either online or within your town. I would recommend in person. More than anything else, if you can. There's plenty of places that might be open to the idea, because you can always go to a business and sell them on the idea of, hey, I'm going to bring people in. People are going to come in specifically for this, and they're going to buy your product, whether it's at a bar or like I did at a coffee shop, or I don't know, like a record store, or whatever. There's all sorts of opportunities out there, and businesses are always looking for a way to get people in the door. That's why they host all kinds of events. So if you can find a funky store that has like a fun vibe to it, you can sell them on the idea like, hey, if this works, we'll get some people out here. And then you have the opportunity to get to meet people within your community that like the same things that you do, and it's great. I mean, films bring people together. I understand why when you go to the movie theater you're not supposed to talk. I get it. I try to not do that, but really the only reason why is because you're in mixed company with strangers. That's really the only reason why, is because you go to a theater and you're with a whole bunch of people that you don't know. If you're in a room with a bunch of people you do know, you can talk. And especially films like this that are really easy to follow, that it's not like you're going to miss some really dramatic moment or an integral piece of the plot because you're yammering and you're going to ruin the whole movie. This is not these aren't Christopher Nolan movies. They aren't movies that you really got to pay attention to. They're movies that, you get a pile of nachos and you get a pile of friends and you laugh a lot and have a great time. I mean, I've never laughed more in my life ever since I started doing this. I mean, I've laughed so hard sometimes off of what somebody said or just something that happened on screen. I've laughed so hard that I've actually been concerned that I was going to hurt myself. Like I've been like, oh, seriously, you have to stop, because like my stomach feels like it's actually going to like tear. Like I feel like my stomach muscles are ripping right now because I'm laughing too much. You have to stop. Like I've never laughed so hard I cried until I started doing this, and I've done that many, many times. So it's fantastic. It's great. I highly recommend that people do it. And the book is also not only a guide for what films, but also how to do it. How do you do it? How do you set this up? How do you start a movie night with your friends? How do you start a movie night publicly? And again, obviously, copyright is a major issue with showing anything publicly. You are not supposed to, so you have to be careful with how you promote it, and also the films that you show. You're not going to show a really, really well-known film that's owned by some major rights holder. You're going to show some grotty thing that's on VHS or something that, it's gray area if anybody even owns it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is a really good note to leave it on here. I think this is, for people, this is a great way to get to know people, or it's a great way to have fun with people. It's one of my friend Ian, who lives, I went to college with him, and he's down here in Philadelphia as well. And it's almost like one of his first things is he's like, I'm having people over for a bad movie night when he meets people at work and things like that. And I think it's a really great way to, like you said, to get to know people and through film in a way that you can talk and be social, I think is important. Now with the book, as we're wrapping up here, they can get the book on Amazon. That's correct?
Yeah, that's where I publish it. It's Awful Awesome. If you just type in Awful Awesome, you'll see it, and it's Action Volume 1, because there will eventually be an Action Volume 2. And who knows, maybe a 3. I don't know. At this point, I've got enough content, enough reviews written for like 75% of an Action Volume 2. Like, I've already got enough. Like, I've got that kind of a backlog. And right now it's $15, and I wanted to try to make it inexpensive so that people could feel comfortable purchasing it without it breaking their bank. I wasn't going to charge like $30 or something like that. I think that's pushing it. I wanted to make it inexpensive so that anybody could feel pretty good about buying it and not have to worry too much about if they didn't like it. But I've got all positive reviews so far, which is great. Yeah, I mean, I'm just here trying to light the way so that other people can have as much fun as me. I've had so much fun watching these movies and meeting people and like, those same people that I met, I've now been friends with for close to 10 years. Like, it's crazy. Like, and it's just because I was showing garbage like Deadly Prey, and Mankillers. Like, I showed those. I showed both of them. It's because I showed movies like that I now have friends that I'm going to have for a long time. And I don't want to be selfish with that. I want as many people to enjoy that as possible, so that you can have fun too.
Yeah, and also anybody looking for the book, I have it linked on my page. I have a new section called DTVC Book Review. So I've got your book there. I've got some stuff from Mitch Lovell and Marco Seidelman. So it is the link is there as well if anybody's looking for it. And I'm going to put it in when I make the podcast post. And I think the price point is really good, because I think the way people should look at it is, if you're going on MVD site or Arrow Films or something like that, and you're looking to add to your collection, this is a good addition to your collection as well. So think of it like that. I think of it as that kind of a purchase, that it's it's going to go with your VHSs and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that was my intent. The book also includes the box art, the cover art, the poster art for every single film, to me, that's part of the appeal too, is, you'll flip through the book and say, oh my gosh, that is such an amazing cover, but is it any good? Is it fun or is it not? So I wanted to make sure to include the art as well, because I think that's just a major part of being a film lover, is just seeing a rad poster and going, oh my gosh, I have to see that movie, and so the titles are wonderful as well, but the poster art really helps. So I wanted to include that too, and that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, I think that's another part. It's one thing I forgot to mention, but it is a really cool part of this, because it, for people that maybe have seen these before, it takes you back to that video store era, and I think it's great. But also, it's going to give you a sense when you're looking up thumbnails when you're on Tubi or Prime or something like that. It's going to look almost identical. So, Skyscraper looks like the picture that that's in here, or Final Sanction, or Mankillers. They look identical, so that helps as well. That when you're kind of scanning, and you'll recognize, oh, I remember that one from the book, and you'll stop on that. I think that helps as well.
Yeah, and again, like you've said, like, the availability of these films is just getting better and better. It's not getting worse and worse. It's getting better and better. You don't have to go to a flea market for 3 years on the hopes to find it on VHS somewhere. It's up on Amazon. It's up on Tubi. Tubi's a great resource. It's one of those resources that I don't think a lot of people know about. I just discovered it a couple months ago and realized, oh my gosh, there's so much great trash on here. Look at this, and it's free. You don't even have to pay for anything. It's all free, which is fantastic. Yeah. And the quality is pretty good too. Pluto is another one that's starting to come up as well. So the availability of this stuff, and not only is the availability getting better, but the quality. Like, you can stream like HD copies of these movies that look amazing. It's like Samurai Cop has never looked better. Miami Connection has never looked better. Like, well, wow. Like, these aren't. I mean, some of them are VHS rips. Let's be honest. Some are, but some are. Like, Mankillers looks quite good, even though I know that they had trouble locating any film prints, so they had to actually get it from like the original video transfer. But it looks good. Like, it looks much better than it did on I have that one on VHS. It looks better than it did on VHS.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is almost like I don't know if renaissance is the right term for it, but it is. I think a lot of people our age that loved this stuff, 20 years ago. It's hard to think of it being 20 or 30 years ago now, but that long ago, they're now saying like, they're the ones that are in charge of getting this stuff put on to Prime or, on Blu-ray or things like that. And they're getting them done for us. And I think it's a really great time for people to be getting into this. And I think your book is a really great, like you said, it's a great roadmap for people that are just starting to get into this kind of stuff that, it's a really, like I said, it's a great investment in that. And I think people should definitely go check it out. If you go onto Amazon, you, like I said, look up Awful Awesome Action. Also look up your name, Jacob Gustafson. Either way, you'll get it right there. And like I said, on my site, I've got the link there on the DTVC book review page as well.
Thank you, and I appreciate you doing that. That's really cool. And it's also cool that you can pronounce my last name. Most people out where I live cannot. We're a rare breed. It's not a common name out here, and it's rare that anybody can actually pronounce it correctly. So bonus points to you.
That's my last name is Poirier, and it's almost impossible because it's just that there's too many I's and it's French and all that stuff. So maybe I'm sympathetic. That might be what it is.
It could be.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you, Jacob. Thank you for being on the show. It was a really great time, and we'll have to do it again sometime. But everybody go out there. Awful Awesome Action. That's the book. Everybody should check it out.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
When you shop at a Walmart Vision Center, you get it. You know that you'll spend a little less on stylish glasses for the whole family.
Welcome to the Vision Center. Let me know if you need help finding the perfect frames.
Hey, Mom, you were right. These glasses are cool.
Hon, they take our insurance. That means Papa's getting a new pair, too.
Whoa, glasses start at just $39. Next stop, groceries.
So you can get a little more of what you need. Find a Vision Center near you. Save money, live better. Walmart.